I'm James Helder. Welcome to Full Court Football 24. Quite privileged to be joined by former Chelsea, Leyton Orient, Millwall, and dare I say, football historian, voice of the uncensored football podcast, none other than John Sitton. How are you? You all right?
All right, James. Yeah. Hello, mate. Yeah, all good. And yourself?
I'm all right.
Yeah,
intros are getting longer and longer. I feel to put in Lord Sitton as your correct title from now on.
Oh, I wish. Yeah. My missus bought me a title, actually, for my 60th.
Really?
Yeah. That was a little self-effacing piss take because we had a load of land stolen from us by the government. So I just said, like, if I had a Euro Millions lottery win, I'd go and buy it back. Yeah. So she said, well, I bought you a title anyway. So it's all her thing. That's the only title I got.
What was your official title? Can you remember what it was?
Nice. I've put it thing is that you get it's funny, like it's you get it like with a ribbon and the seal and it rolled up in a parchment and all that. Yeah, it's quite good. It's somewhere up north, which obviously I ain't even going to go up there. You know what I mean? And I think I own 3 fir trees or something. Yeah, she just said I just thought just put a better slant on things with regards to all the land you lost. Yeah, there we are. That's my missus all over. You know what I mean? So her life revolved around like basically looking after me, spoiling me rotten. Yeah, I'm a lucky boy.
You're a lucky man.
Yeah.
Today, I want to talk a little bit about football and current affairs.
Okay, mate.
Manchester City sitting top of the table, as you predicted quite early on in the season that Manchester City would be dominant this year. Thoughts on how they're playing? Thoughts on how everything's coming together for them?
Yeah, I mean, you could argue last year was a bit of a freak in terms of Liverpool setting the record, first title for whatever it was, 30 odd years. I just had a sneaky feeling that they'd finish above Liverpool this year and sort of underpinned it by saying whoever finishes above them will win it. But I just fancied them for having a renaissance. And I did say that, yeah, sort of without bigging myself up too much, I just said, like, if he gets his head together, he'll make a comeback stones. And I think he's been a bedrock as well as the new signing. But really and truly, I suppose the flip side of it, James, really, you can say, well, they should do. With the money at their disposal, he can go bumps, sort of click his fingers, metaphorically speaking, and go out, get a £64 million centre-back. And I said, all it is with Stones, all he needs to be doing to get alongside him is to get hold of a coach and say, can you do 20 minutes with me? And he, needs to be better with be a bit more mature about his decision making and not put the ball at risk in bad areas and just settle for being a defender on occasions. And that's what he's done. So you've got a lot of rock solid partnership there. He can rotate the fullbacks. He's managed to, without too much of a blip, replace David Silva, have a continuum now. And then the front players sort of, I wasn't aware of it, but they've been together a while. But what he does, he never seems to play the same side. So he's making full use, great management. He's making full use of the whole squad, rotating and resting as and when he needs to. Or, like I've said, with regards to English coaches and English players, and my thoughts on the FA in previous podcasts with you and elsewhere, he makes it difficult for the opposition and he sets different problems for the opposition by rotating the players who got high football IQ so he can change the system. You know what I mean? So, yeah, they won't get caught now. Even with the thing, there's no way they get caught. I'll be absolutely shocked. They've got a tough one coming up weekend, Fulham, who are fighting for survival. You had the blip the other week in the Manchester derby. And I think United played against them quite possibly the only way you can play against them with fantastic discipline, as in keeping them pressed as high up as you possibly can. And they nicked the 2-0. But with regards to the running, I can't see them getting caught now, mate.
One player you've been lavishing praise on for quite a while, Phil Foden, obviously coming into his own now at Manchester City. What did you make of Phil Foden's penalty appeal, controversially, against
Southampton? Part of the game, isn't it? I think if anyone, when work was really was good, I used to stay out for hours and hours. Is one of my couple of my favourite shows. One's a pal of mine, Adrian Durham, on Drive Time on TalkSport. The other one, I used to listen to Goldstein and Cundy on the Sports Bar. And Jason's very forthright in his opinions, and you know, he's very outspoken, and most of the time very sort of very tangible and intelligent. And he's right what he says. You can't argue with it. He's basically saying that you know, any player worth their salt, really, and really, I suppose you're admitting to being a bit of a cheat. But any player worth their salt, they're going to try and any which way they can, they'll try and sneak an advantage or gain an advantage, or you know, see if they can get a decision in their favour. So, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to be no different. It's not, you know, ain't Sunday morning. It's multi-millions. It's professional. So any which way you can. So I wouldn't, you know, where he's concerned, I wouldn't be holding that against him.
Foden obviously stayed on his feet. No penalty was given. Do you feel that that's a problem when referees can watch it back on VAR and have a look at?
You know, I mean, it's created so many problems, this VAR. But I just think like this, probably a penalty shout is one of only 3 things it should be used for. In terms of trying to stay on his feet, you got to commend him. You know, he might have seen something else. He might have been trying to do something else in terms of gaining half a yard. So because he's got what it is with him, he's got when he unloads a shot, he's got a very short back lift. So if he's in the right sort of area, in this case in and around the penalty area, he might have been trying to stay on his feet for a reason. Do you know what I mean? So either way, if he's trying to nick the advantage either way, you just say good for you, son. That's what I'd do. It's just maybe I've played with coaches and managers. They've said like, maybe you want to think about going down there. Maybe you want to think about being a bit cuter. They used to say trying to be a bit cuter, maybe get an emphatic penalty decision, make the referee's mind up, give him a decision to make, all these type of expressions, you know what I mean? So at the end of the day, he's you become a product of your environment. He's going to be no different, mate.
We've seen a massive turnaround, one of your old clubs, Chelsea, since Thomas Tuchel's arrival.
Yeah.
Incredible turnaround of fortunes for the players. They seem to really be playing for Tuchel as well. What do you put that down to? What impact and what has he changed you can see looking at him?
When Frank was having problems earlier in the year, on the other podcast we do, I maintained that he got off to a good start, Frank, right? So Champions League, European Champions League qualification, FA Cup final, under normal circumstances, I'd expect Chelsea to win it. I was disappointed the fact that when I went and watched them to celebrate a birthday against West Ham, that they only had one pattern of play, and the movement was quite predictable. West Ham held out their just superb discipline and nicked the game 1-0 at Stamford Bridge. Then you fast forward to the cup final. I was perplexed, shocked, surprised that all the problems that Arsenal created was in Arsenal's left-hand channel, midway in Chelsea's half, so the right hand side of Chelsea's defence. All it needed to do was to get the outside right to drop back one, the full back to drop back one, screen the front of the centre back, and for the centre back to give himself a yard and a half a mark on the outside. So that ball into that area could have been nullified, and it wasn't, right. So you fast forward to now, and or let's do it in order. So a couple of 3 months ago, 4 months ago, I was saying if Frank gets both ends right, we're in business, right? As in one of my old clubs, okay? And then what happened with Frank. And then I think all he's done, the new guy, Tuchel, he's come in and he's instilled a bit of Germanic efficiency, bit of discipline. It's not as I detected at the end of Frank's reign, James, I've got to be honest, a bit of off the cuff, play how you like, anarchy type football, where players were being totally self-indulgent. and not thinking of the side and not thinking of the consequences and making wrong decisions because they were just, in inverted commas, expressing themselves. Sometimes I can call that doing what you feel like doing. You know what I mean? I think what he's done is brought in more of a discipline. There's still a massive stewards over Werner, but he's given himself a bit of an head start by wiping the slate clean with certain players. He's brought the experience of Alonso back in. I think he's tightened things up, not great to a great extent, but ever so slightly with the centre backs. He's got an head start language-wise with the likes of Rudiger, Werner, etc. He's got Odoi at it with Reece James, Hudson-Odoi, who's a wide man, but he's got him at it, so they're competing for the right wing-back spot. Mounts read the script. He was Frank's sort of blue-eyed boy, and I thought he was getting away with some diabolical body language and reaction to what was going on in terms of recovery runs and putting a foot in and remonstrating with the goalkeeper. He's addressed the goalkeeping situation, which was you could see from outer space. They've done 74 million in cold blood, and they're going to struggle to get that back. And I just think it all bodes well for the results that he's been picking up. You know what I mean? A lot of it, contrary to popular opinion, and sometimes you need when you see it better from the outside looking in, but contrary to popular opinion, there's a lot of football that's not really bionuclear physics. It's very, very simple in terms of the decision making and what you have to do to rectify stuff. And I just think he's done that. Long may it continue, because minimum prerequisite Champions League qualification.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the football index. This thing's been marketed. I've seen it advertised for around 2 years. Heavily marketed on the football market.
Yeah.
I was led to believe, or from my understanding of it, that it wasn't solely a gambling platform, that it was an investment in the players stats build up, therefore having dividends for picking a good team that they're performing in over the course of a season. The latest is that the website's gone down. The company is potentially facing liquidation. A lot of people out of pocket, a lot of football fans out of pocket. Horror stories coming out that people have invested huge sums in that platform. May I ask what your thoughts are?
Like you, I've heard it advertised. Like you, I was aware of it. But I'll be honest with you, these types of things, I don't really take too much notice of it. I always remember said to me, Dario Gradi said to me at Chelsea as a kid, I think I was about 14, maybe 15. Yeah, I was 14 because I think it was during a period during the school holidays when we had the training camps. And I'll never forget the remark that he just said, do what you're good at. And then he sort of basically said, articulated the same message when we come across each other. And I was I don't know, joint manager, first team coach at Leyton Orient, and he was still running things at Crewe. Do what you're good at. And it's good advice. So the point being, I just think like it's diabolical. It's very, very unfortunate for the people that have invested in it. But the bottom line is, I wouldn't go anywhere near things that I mean, I don't know what to say. You have things have happened in my life that if I look back now and I look at the experience I've got now, and there's certain things I think to myself, well, why did I roll the dice and take that chance and gamble with things? You know what I mean? If I knew then what I know now, then it's about, like I was talking to people last night about something different, completely different, with regards to what's happened to this young lady on her way home across Clapham Common. I was talking to people about minimising risk. Yeah. But the bottom line is, I've always said, James, there's a solution. There's always a solution. We can talk about the problems all day long, like the pundits on radio and the pundits on TV. What we're a bit different on this podcast and the other one I do with Lord Hudson and Don Shanks. What we try and do is we try and find solutions. And I still maintain now, I know we've got an MP for culture, media and sport, but I just think there should be a position because it's multi-billions we're talking about now, multi-billions in the game in this country. There should be an MP for football. And I know you've got all the things like, you know, Financial Conduct Authority and FSA or whatever it's called, FCA. But I just think there should be someone, an office that oversees it all, because it's a murky world, mate. It's a very murky world. And I just think like we need to tighten the net with a lot of things in this country. And that's probably just one of them.
I'd like to ask your thoughts a little bit on current affairs as well. Did you happen to watch any of the coverage involving Piers Morgan, Meghan Markle, the royal family, the whole circus around everything that happened?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, there ain't a lot happening Monday night, so it was a given, wasn't it? Do you know what I mean? I'm an avid, like, I love films, books, TV, art. You know, so I'm an easy man to please, like one of my kids has always maintained. So yeah, we sat around and watched it all, and then we watched the aftermath as well the following day, and then the way it was reported on the news with Piers Morgan. We watched the original interview. Me and my missus passing comment to one another, because we're left in the house with a boy now, my son. So like the girls are out with their respective partners and husbands and whatever. So yeah, we was talking all the way through it. Yes, it's quite an expose, wasn't it?
What did you make of Piers Morgan walking off of his own show due to a statement and comments made by Alex Beresford?
Well, I've been informed there's a thing doing the rounds. I think over the last couple of days or today, they've got a bit of history. I think the other guys have done the same to him. But if we're talking specifically about Piers Morgan, he's a bit Marmite, isn't he? My opinion is on him. I've got at it with him over the Arsenal, you know, but because like he's a very, you know, excuse me, he's a like a rabid Arsenal supporter. I've got at it with him. He gets at it with different people, but I just think like he's misinterpreted. I think before we come to this with regards to what he did in the studio, I think a lot of what he does is based on acerbic wit and tongue in cheek. I think that he probably on that particular day, he probably did trying to control his anger, because he's obviously got very, very strong opinions on what he feels about the royal family and the way that the Prince Harry and Meghan spoke about him. He's obviously got very, very, very strong opinions. I think he'd done it to contain his anger, which was probably the best thing. It was sort of the lesser of all the evils if he'd have come back at the guy with regards to what his thoughts on what Meghan Markle said. Obviously, the other side of him, the flip side of him, which I think people don't realise, because you've got like we live in a world like I experienced last night of the professionally offended, and I worded something the way I worded it, and it bore absolutely no resemblance to what they were saying to me and trying to accuse me of, as in inverted commas, victim blaming. I don't even fucking know what that means. I don't even know. I would never have thought of it. Seriously, I would never have thought of it. I wouldn't even know the expression. And then, you know, I suppose if they're inclined to say you're sort of trying to implicate me in it being sort of subconscious, you know what I mean? It being in my subconscious, but I would never do that. And especially a married man with 2 daughters. So I've got 3 women in my family. I would never do anything like that with regards to what they've said, like victim blaming. But a lot of what he says, because we live in a world of the professionally offended, like I say, people are only too willing to misinterpret things and jump on it from a great height. But at the end of the day, that serves his purpose. A lot of what he does, and I hear similar things about a pal of mine. You meet him in real life, it's chalk and cheese. Adrian Durham on Talk Sport. It's their job, right? So everybody's listening. It's their job, Piers Morgan, whoever, Adrian Durham, it's their job to provoke reaction and provoke comment and provoke thought, so that you ring in and you react, etc. Right? And I just think that's where he's coming from. And a lot of it's tongue in cheek. He's a bit smug and a bit smarmy but normally, like if you're a multi-millionaire, a lot of people tend to be that way, smug and smarmy. You know what I mean? And a little bit full of themselves. You know, at the end of the day, him storming out probably saved it from escalating.
Do you think it showed a lack of integrity not to answer Alex Beresford's questions, regardless of whether you believe it to be true or not? I think, like, in not answering the questions and storming off, it was good or bad for the person?
Yeah, he should have stuck around. The geezer obviously winds him up. They obviously don't get on. He was doing a thing, I'm led to believe he was doing a thing a while back, and the guy, this Beresford guy, obviously he's very ambitious, and he wanted to talk out. We all are, you know, and people, we've all been guilty. He wanted to talk outside of his remit. He's meant to be talking about the weather. Piers Morgan's doing an item, and I'm going on second-hand information, but he's doing an item, and then this Beresford pipes up, and he's just said, well, hold on a minute. Who's asked your opinion? You're the weatherman. You know what I mean, etc. So there's obviously, I would say that was delivered a bit tongue-in-cheek. It was delivered to get a reaction. That's what he's like. But there's obviously a bit of friction there with regards to his integrity. We've all made mistakes. If I wanted to be particularly vindictive, I could say that I think he was very, very lucky to get away with stuff. How do I word this? I mean, you had the phone hacking scandal, and he was editor at the time of one of the newspapers implicated. Right? Well, don't tell me that nothing. Don't tell me that by rights what should happen is I should know everything. What's going on? It's like the manager of a football club. You should know everything that's going on in and around the place, and yet, even though it was one of the papers implicated, he got off scot-free. I think media, where the media is concerned, it's a sweeping generalisation, shall we say, right? But I've come to the conclusion that the news is not the news. The news is basically storytelling. It's not. They're not there. They've got their own agenda. Right, you know, that's what I'm trying to say. Because, like, if you really wanted to dig and look under all the rocks and dig deep, you know what I mean, you could come up with like massive amount of stories that they leave it alone. You know, I got talking about bits and pieces, which we all know about. Some of the stuff we take for granted, and they try and do feel good factor stories, etc., etc. But they should be looking at the things like what's going on in, let's say, every city. But I'm biased, so let's say London. You know what I mean? The crime rate in London, record numbers of youth murders, record number of knife crime. A mayor who says, paraphrasing slightly, yeah, London's not really safe. It's not safe. Well, he's been in charge of it for how many years? And then before him, Boris Johnson, who's now the Prime Minister. It depends how deep you want to go, James. I mean, at the end of the day, I can talk for the next 3-4 hours on London, its commerce, the economy, the black cab trade, the night czar, who's now on 87 grand a year, the slob that she is. She's been like milking the wage even before COVID. What was she doing with regards to being the night czar? I mean, it's a piss take. And it's, you know, UK taxpayers have got to wake up and smell the coffee beans and the bush that the beans come from. It's diabolical what's going on. I could talk to you about law and order with a kid in the OB. I could talk to you about like the gangs culture, the drugs culture, the fact that we're becoming a mini America, the fact that I think, my own theory at the moment for quite a while now, the drugs trade has been keeping the economy going. Because no one else has got any fucking money, because the country's been run into the ground and the city's been run into the ground. How can that be right when you've got like someone who was the Prime Minister, who was the mayor, now the Prime Minister? He made all these cuts with his massive culling process with the Metropolitan Police. You've now got joint enterprise. If you look at the side of a police car, it says Metropolitan Police working in partnership with Transport for London. What the fuck is that about? Right? Don't get me started, because I'm going to start going into one. Do you know what I mean? You got Transport for London used to be like the public carriage office / London Transport. So one took care of like buses and tubes, which had been empty for ages, not just because of COVID. That's a red herring. It's not just a red herring. It's a red herring the size of a fucking Alaska salmon, right? And then you had the other side where the cabs were under the public carriage office. Well, now all the budget all comes under one umbrella, and they've milked the law, closed all these police stations. Now we're wondering why women can't walk across Clapham Common unscathed. It's diabolical what's going on in this country. And what you maybe want to think about doing is, or what I was thinking of doing was getting my missus on this is my wife's idea. Get my son to film me going through every single point that I want discussed. Because if I was in the studio and they raised it, we'd run out of time. And I'd have Khan and Johnson in front of me, and I would absolutely tear them apart. I would cut them to pieces over the decision making from these Whitehall mandarins and all this intricately woven web of government. It's absolute diabolical. None of it whatsoever based on common sense. None of it whatsoever based on common sense. We've spunk billions on cyclists and cycle lanes, cycle superhighways, mini-Holland initiatives for a 1% at most cycling minority in London, right? Well, now all of a sudden you've got a steward's inquiry about do women feel vulnerable? They're exchanging their thoughts on the radio and on social media that I'm hearing yesterday on feeling vulnerable and their experiences, etc. I watched Carol Malone last night talking about walking down the road with a set of car keys between her knuckles. What is that about, right? And yet they're talking about a non-existent, mythical, nonsensical green issue in the UK, and cyclists are going to save the world, so we're going to spend billions on them, but at the same time totally disregard what I think most people want, the majority of good, hard-working, tax-paying, sensible people want, which is law and order. And yet they closed all the police stations over a period of time. We're down to the last 73 police stations. And then you've got Khan saying he's going to close half of the remaining 73 police stations. So for me, I'm going back a decade now when I predicted it all. It's carte blanche, right? It's absolutely carte blanche. Criminals charter. It's a criminals charter. You know what I mean? And no wonder now people don't feel safe. No wonder now people are feeling vulnerable. And like I said on social media last night, it's about minimising the risk, which you shouldn't have to. You should be able to walk anywhere you want, when you want, at whatever time you want. But it's the same for men as well. A slightly long-winded answer to your point and to your question, but I could go on for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours talking about this stuff, one item at a time, and I can cut to pieces all the decisions that have been made. The bottom line is the media is the media. Piers Morgan's part of the media. So is this Beresford part of the media, and his partner alongside him. Is it Susanna Reid? Susan Reid, whatever her name is. Part of the media is just like I'll tell you what I call it. Chewing gum for the brain, right? It's about passing the time of day with items that are complete. Most of them, I'd say 90% of them are complete and utter bullshit. That includes loose women who have been getting away with, they've actually won awards, but they've been getting away with things for years, although they've toned it down a bit lately. But in the early days, they got away absolutely criminal, what they got away with and what they were talking, what they were saying and what they were saying about men in particular and some of the stuff they alluded to. And you had 4 women getting away with something that 4 men would never have got away with, right? So I call it chewing gum for the brain. You know what I mean? What I find difficult is sifting through it and dismissing the nonsensical bullshit on a day-to-day basis. But where he's concerned, he's got a track record, hasn't he? Morgan's got a track record. But what he's done, he's been like a goldfish swimming through razor blades. At the end of the day, he's managed to avoid getting his collar felt when he was editor. Someone else remarked, I don't know if it's true or not, I'm going on second-hand information, moody pictures of British servicemen, in inverted commas, torturing Iraqi prisoners. Whether that was something to do with him or not, I don't know. So him throwing a strop like a petulant child and walking out of a studio, honestly thought he was better than that. You know, being privately educated and living in a posh square in Kensington, in the West End of Kensington, honestly thought he was more eloquent than that, and he'd have stood his ground and cut the geezer to pieces verbally. But he obviously, maybe it's to do with the fact that he had to get up at 3, 4 in the morning to get to the studio and get the makeup on and have a bit of breakfast and a cup of coffee. And after what I think someone said, it was a good 6 years. So after doing that for 6 years, you don't know, he might have another agenda. Time to go. And then people like him, they see the opportunity and they have it on their toes. And what he's done it in a sensationalist way.
Alex Beresford's probably the most high-profile weatherman in the world right now. Definitely overtaken Michael Fish. I know that. Seems in America his argument with Piers Morgan. He's got this huge traction, huge status for himself.
Yeah.
How would you feel if he was the man that replaced Piers Morgan? Good morning, Brett.
I'm never up early enough to watch it, so I'll give. There's no fucks given here. I'll be honest with you. But he's obviously, when he's piped up as weatherman, he's obviously opinionated, and he was obviously ambitious, and he obviously wanted to be heard, and he piped up. So yeah, well, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at the end of the day. I mean, my missus was watching thing. I mean, you get all sorts of accusations and bullshit. What I want is I want a fair and balanced thing with everything. I suffer from an acute case of ideology right through my life, whether it's football or life. I know I've made mistakes, etc. But my missus was making me aware of this thing with her trending last night, Sharon Osbourne. She's sticking by her friend Piers Morgan, and she knows him, and she knows, and she's quite right. She said at the end of the day, he's entitled to his opinion. He's entitled to articulate his opinion. We're meant to be living in, like he said, in a democracy. What I've seen in this democracy for too long now, far too long, is positive discrimination, and round it goes. And then if someone comes down on me like a ton of bricks, like I think Sharon Osbourne had 2 or 3 people around her who were friends, and all her friends were people of colour. One of them started shedding a few tears, and she's like, "No, you don't get to do that, missus." And someone else said about, "Well, Sharon, you know, at the end of the day, we're friends." And then she's implied, Sharon Osbourne, that, well, we were, because she's not having any of it. Do you know what I mean? And I agree with her. At the end of the day, they was asking her, how can you stick by him? Well, you know, you've been in around, don't matter how right or how wrong someone is, you've been for decades and decades and decades now. You know, it's the boot's been on the other foot, so to speak, where rightly or wrongly, you've got a certain echelon aspect, ilk of society who've stuck together no matter what. But you now, I think for a couple of decades at least now, in my time, as one of the silent majority, although I happen to think I'm now in a minority, I've watched from a distance, seen it from a distance, whereby we've got an atmosphere, an environment, shall we say, of positive discrimination. I don't believe the statistics for 1 minute as I look around. But at the end of the day, it's up to them. I mean, I've got my own questions. Because I think the interview regarding Harry and Meghan Markle was full of contradictions. If you want me to give you some examples, I can give you some examples. She talks about being a strong woman and women having strength. She talks about women having a voice. And yet it would seem that she conducted herself the exact opposite. She wasn't at all strong, and she couldn't handle certain aspects of public life within the royal family environment. And she said that women have a voice. Well, why didn't she use her voice? The only time she seems to use her voice is if it's to highlight an agenda that she's pushing. You know what I mean? If someone's backing me into a corner, well, I'll tell you now, forget me. If someone's backing my missus or one of my girls into a corner and they don't feel right about things, they'll pipe up. You know what I mean? That's what I call strong women. And I respect it. I was brought up. I was a mummy's boy, and the main faces in my family. Forget me Uncle Albert, who grew up with a craze. The main faces in my family was his wife, my Auntie Ellen, Aunt Nell we used to call her, and my mum, who was her sister. So I come from a matriarchal family. And then my mother-in-law is a very, very strong woman, came to this country when she was 14, worked so hard, even when people were thieving off her, to save enough money to bring her family over from Cyprus, because there was no work and no future there on on the face of it, on the surface of it. I'm going back to 1947. She's still as strong and opinionated now in her mid-80s. My missus has taken after her. But she's got her dad's calmness and serenity. You know what I mean? She's got to be pushed right to the edge. And my oldest daughter probably takes a little bit after me, and my middle daughter takes after me missus. So I'm used to strong women. So the point being, if you want to talk about strong women and women having a voice, why didn't you pipe up? Why all of a sudden were you're being cradled because you didn't want to live anymore? All I can say is, like I said, I coated her off when she started complaining about the kids being at home, Cape Middleton. I said, yeah. I went on social. I said, yeah, it must be hard ordering all them butlers and maids around all day. What you got to do, I'll tell you what's hard is a single mother, like someone said yesterday, in a 15th floor flat in Peckham. That's what you call hard. Not ordering butlers and maids to clear up after some one of your kids who shit himself. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, I can't be having it. It's a trade-off for a privileged lifestyle, right? Then she talks about racism within the royal family, alleged racism in the royal family. So we word it correctly for the sake of the podcast, right? And the plan is, or ends up being, emigrating to one of the most racist countries on the planet. Work that one out, because I can't. In my first book, A Little Knowledge is a Dangerous Thing, I've actually championed the cause. My brain's nearly saw the light of day when I took on four white racists who was picking on a black player of mine, and they all had weapons, and all I had was my hands. And this vermin cockroach filth, one of them crept up behind me and hit me over the back of the head with a baseball bat because I was sticking up for a black kid, right? So, people can't say sits this, sits that, because I believe what's fair is fair, and I think I'm an honourable man. But the bottom line is, the point I was making in my book, I've actually said, James, about the plight of African Americans in the USA for decades now. You know what I mean? And it's all one silly bullshit game, right? And this is my belief. This is my true belief from within my heart, right? I live and let live. I don't care. This is a quote from a documentary about the mid-late 70s with the gunfights between two political parties who they were supporting. One of them, he's got like a Spanish type name, a white Jamaican. Michael Manley looked more Jamaican. But I remember this old boy with no teeth and a flat cap, and he said, I don't care if a man's black, white or yellow, as long as him straight with me, right? And I've always remembered that. And that's how I've led my life. You understand what I mean? The bottom line is, I just think the more oxygen you give, in inverted commas, racism, right? Because you're always going to get, like, let's have it right, you're always going to get two brain cell fucking idiots, but racism is a two-way street. Well, I just think people should just live and let live, and don't tread on each other's toes. Leave me alone, I'll leave you alone at the end of the day. You know what I mean? And regardless of skin color, I judge a man or a woman by the way they are towards me, right? But my belief, this is my true belief from within, right? This is from the heart. I just think the more oxygen given to so-called racists, the more it perpetuates the vicious cycle, right? Because like me, I'm kicking back now. I'm pushing back now because I've had enough of this positive discrimination that's even existed in my own trade under Ken Livingstone. I just think it's totally wrong. What happened to standards? What happened to quality assurance? Well, what happened was Ken Livingstone said that for too long, the black cab trade has been a white working class mafia. Well, you ain't going to get a more disparaging racist thing than that. He said it's a white working class men's club. You're not going to get something more because it means that we're exclusive and we're not inclusive. And yet the knowledge since 1654 has been open to any race, colour, creed, gender, sexual orientation in the country, as long as you've got a clean bill of health, a clean police record, and the aptitude to complete the equivalent of a PhD, right? So that I've started pushing back from then. You understand what I mean? So the point being, it creates a vicious cycle because I'm not having it. I'm not having people slag this country off. Even though I was a royalist, I'm not so much a royalist now. I think after Queen Elizabeth II, it should become a republic, right? And I think it's antiquated. I think the whole establishment is antiquated. It needs new thinking. But the bottom line is, right, you're still going to get... my uncle Brian put it, I think, perfectly. He went, Johnny, you know, life, what it's all about. And I went, what? He went like this: it's all one big fuck up, right? So people make mistakes, families make mistakes, families squabble, people have disputes in industry, in professions, in the trade. There's a right way of doing things and a wrong way of doing things. People go always at the end of the day, they have their own agenda, like I experienced at a particular football club, right? They didn't want to do things properly, and look at it now. Right. So we go. So it's, for me, it's all like an intricately woven web that's knitted in, right? Because you look at it now. I'm looking at the top half of Division 2, and I counted 12 clubs who started in non-league. And like I said at Leyton Orient, if you don't do things properly and put the correct foundations in place and have quality assurance and place demands on people, clubs who started a long, long way behind you in non-league, they're going to leapfrog you and overtake you. And that's exactly what's happened, right? But people going, oh, we got promoted from the National League and we had a promotion under, well, what, fucking once in 25 years? What good's that, right? But it's the same with life. It's the same with life. At the end of the day, you've got a vicious cycle. And I spoke on a podcast last night about my missus being slagged off by someone, by the English, because it was still fairly new. Like interracial marriages were still fairly new. I can say so much that would be offensive. It's unbelievable on camera about my wife's people wouldn't allow them to marry into certain cultures, and it was forbidden. They wouldn't allow them to marry certain people. Then I was on the end of racism in my own country. My wife's godmother and aunt, who was her mum's sister, right? To my face, we were gathering in my mother-in-law's and father-in-law's house to go to a wedding on a Sunday. And she says, what are you doing getting engaged to him? You shouldn't be getting engaged to him. You should be marrying a nice Greek boy. She said, look at him. He's English. He's no good to us. Look how ugly he is, right? Well, imagine how I felt. Right? And I felt strongly enough about it to remember it to this day, because what it does, it becomes part of your development, right? So here's the irony. She was married to a Jamaican who was the loveliest guy on the planet, Uncle Roy. His real name was Ruel. He came as part of the Windrush generation to get work. He was an aircraft engineer. He came to this country and he rented a room in my mother-in-law's 4-story house in Highbury, which is how he met her sister, my wife's aunt, right? And they took her to Cyprus twice to get away from him, to try and to break off the union, to break off the relationship, for her to forget about him, because it was an era when white women didn't even go with West Indians, never mind a white Greek Cypriot woman. You understand what I mean? So the point being, James, listen to this and listen to this very carefully, right? It's part of a cycle. And because she'd been on the end of racism, being with a West Indian guy, a Jamaican guy, right? Who, like I said, you couldn't wish to meet a lovelier fella, right? Unbelievable, like strong physique, but had a bit of nut on him. And we used to talk about things. The only time I reared up with him was when he said, we were sitting there watching, it just come out of the blue, but I blame it on his illness. He said, you raped my island. You raped my island, right? Because it was a former British colony. I said, what, Jamaica? He went, yeah. I said, I've never been there. Right. So the point being, it's got fuck all to do with me. You understand what I mean? But it's part of the incestuous politics of European nations, whereby the sins of our forefathers, we're paying for the sins of our forefathers. And I'm not having it. I won't have it, because I never had any profit out of it. And what's fair is fair. So what I want is what's fair. That's the bottom line. But she refused to break that cycle of racism. So now she became racist towards me. On top of that, she called me ugly. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's something that people, fair-minded, sensible people need to address it. because you've only got to look at the Black Lives Matter thing, right? You've got people taking the knee over here, and they're still taking the knee. But what they've done it like the wars in Afghan and Iraq, in Afghanistan and Iraq, right? When we went to war in Afghanistan, right? Tony Blair and his 666 advisor Campbell, right, came out with 5 different reasons why we went. Well, they thought I had a shit memory. Very quickly, they come out with 5 different reasons why we went to war in Afghanistan, right? So they're basically glossing over things and insulting everybody's intelligence. But I've got a very good memory, so I remembered all 5 reasons, right? Well, it's the same. It's the same here. If you want to stick to specifics, what are we doing over here, taking the knee for a guy 3,000 miles away when racism doesn't exist in this country? And if it does exist in this country, it's been perpetrated and created by the one and only enemy, which is the establishment. You understand? Because the last thing they want, listen what I'm going to tell you. The last thing they want is for me, someone like me, to tell the truth and say to the establishment, I've got far more in common with a hard-working, tax-paying black man who's raising his family, or Asian, than I have with you. You understand? Because the same 5 families that have owned and run London for the last 500 years, they still own and run it now. You understand what I'm saying? And then you had the payoff. You had the EDL and supporters of football clubs coming down to protect the statues. And then you had 2 different types of policing. So if I'm talking to them, if I'm talking to the leader of all the people leading the blacks, taking the knee and going around clumping coppers and laughing on, they were filming it, clumping, making coppers retreat 4 and 5-handed, surrounding them, calling them names. Your mother does this, your mother, and then someone else walking up behind one right outside Portcullis house, right, and whacking him in the back of the head, and he hits the deck, and then you've got all these people laughing, right? So a blatant disregard for the uniform and the law and order, right? On top of being an offence. If I'm talking to the leader of the so-called leader of them and the so-called leader of the EDL, I'll just go, you know what? The establishment are getting you at it. You know how I know they're getting you at it is because they've got you pulling statues down and threatening and defacing statues and going down on one knee and causing thing in Parliament Square. And they've got you because they think you're coming down to protect the statues that basically the law should have been protecting. And then on top of that, to confirm it, you've got 2 different types of policing when it happened. Right? So don't tell me that it's not a vicious cycle and they're getting them at it. And for me, right, the bottom line, James, is the more oxygen you give it, the more it suits the establishment.